the absence of ill health is not the presence of good health. And medicine's really interested in catching people going from -15 to -100, but it hasn't got any skills or expertise in taking someone from -10 to +40. I've loved PerformX from the first encounter I had with it. In the fact, it felt like it was trying to keep people abreast of what is going on, so it felt cutting edge. I don't know where people's source for what's happening is, but if they haven't got a good one, they should come to PerformX. The advisory panel that I'm delighted to be a part of are some great industry voices saying what they're seeing, what they're feeling. You can't be abreast of everything. If you take the collective voices of that table and their collective opinions, I think you get a really refined perspective on the present, best practice, but also future and innovation. I'm looking forward to again seeing best practice, and I think the diversity and intelligence of the speakers and events at PerformX is unlike any other event.
What does the gym of the future look like?
I think...
Ollie, thank you very much for joining us on PerformX X Lab.
My pleasure.
So yeah, a serious load of accolades, bit of an intro, and I know you won't. You're a humble bloke, so you won't say it about yourself. But yeah, you co-founded the world's most advanced and expensive health assessment in London's Harley Street. Consulted globally for the likes of Nike and HSBC. And founded Future Practice, which we'll obviously come on to, and a whole list of other accolades. So yeah, great to have you on board.
It's a pleasure. I hate introductions because I don't know how you can introduce yourself without sounding smug, because you're only talking about yourself. But lots of lovely things, and a real pleasure to be here.
And I think when we get out and about a lot to the gym network, and I think you always come across very highly rated. Everyone loves hearing from you, and always say how much of a nice person you are as well, so that always helps, mate. So yeah.
Listen, there's a few people out there. There'll be some stories beneath the floorboards. There's some bodies. There's some bodies out there. But I love the fitness profession. I sort of spent many years in those jobs, not necessarily directly in fitness. I was sort of within fitness in what is now Nuffield Health. As they became more of a gym business, then I went into sort of more medical practice, came back to fitness. And just what a community it is, a genuine sort of urge for people to lift each other up, co-promote, to connect people, altruistically. Not everything is what's in it for me, and I just think as an industry, it's a beautiful set of people. So I love being in it.
No, it's true. It's true. So what we want to dig into today really is identifying the problems faced by the industry, which I think you've talked about in a lot of detail, so I'd love to kind of dig into some of that. I've done a lot of reading and listening into yourself, and just want to kind of pull out some of the main bits that our audience of fitness industry professionals ultimately can take away from. So I think as a good starting point, which is the elephant in the room really, is just how that needle is still not really turning, and we're still stuck at this sort of 85% of the country not doing any regular exercise. So talk me through your thoughts on that and why you think that is.
Yeah, I mean the word itself, fitness, is a huge problem because it's sort of connotated with being fit, and so you look at what percentage of gyms are full of young athletic people. I look at gyms and I love that those people are in there, but I sort of cry that they're the people who maybe need it the least. And the people who need it the most are walking past the outside feeling technically, culturally excluded from that club. So fitness has become a gang, and it's a beautiful gang. And I think everyone who managed to survive a fitness business through COVID recognized the power of community, because that was maybe the only thing that kept some of these operators alive. The fact they had this connection with their people and people had connection with each other. I just think outside of that community are Gen Pop. And you raise this stat, we've got about 15% penetration of adult population into gyms, and it's just been there or thereabouts for a long period of time, whilst simultaneously the health of the nation has progressively deteriorated year on year. And you've got this really sort of challenging thing that if you look at gyms as I do as the ultimate opportunity to improve your health and well-being, forget the word fitness, what a shame that an increasingly sick population isn't leveraging the most powerful facility, practitioners and community that would change the shape of their lives. I think it goes back to marketing. What are we selling? If I try and grab a 55-year-old female off the street, which, you know, could result in a lawsuit potentially. If I grab her off the street and say, join the gym, what's going to be her reaction? You know, am I selling her a change in body weight? I haven't asked her whether she likes or doesn't like her body weight. Am I selling her fitness, which draws her back to being left out of netball at school because she wasn't incredibly sporty and she didn't have a great connection with herself? You know, am I selling her being surrounded by beautiful people wearing ever more, you know, shape-shifting garments? What am I selling her? And I don't see a message to her on the poster outside most gyms. And I don't see enough of her in the gyms to warrant her feeling a part of that community. And again, you get the outlier to every rule. So you'll have some facilities that have really created a place for this lady or versions thereof. But until fitness learns that fitness isn't appealing, the word means nothing, body composition isn't enough of a marker of success, and adapts not just the messaging, but the delivery to embrace a broader, what I would call well-being message, it can't expect that lady to walk in because she'd have to be so motivated to overcome those barriers, and then she'll have to be so driven to sustain behavior in that center. And I think that is a huge fallibility of where the fitness industry is the wrong name with the wrong product for the majority of people.
It makes a lot of sense, and the kind of, even though things are moving on and the tech is developing a lot, it's the fit are getting fitter ultimately. Those kind of yeah.
And I'd say the fit are getting fitter, but certainly not necessarily more well. You know, right. I think there's a real challenge. You know, I know a lot of the work I do is trying to just define what wellness means, what well-being means, because, you know, having 6% body fat as a male doesn't mean you're well.
No.
You know, it doesn't mean you're not suffering with crushing anxiety and poor, you know, self-worth. Doesn't mean you haven't got chronic, you know, absence of quality sleep. Doesn't mean you haven't got, you know, awful digestion with slimy poos or no poos whatsoever. Lovely stuff. You know, it doesn't mean you're well, having, you know, incredible aesthetics. And what we often know is to achieve those incredible aesthetics comes at the cost of well-being or wellness in a broader definition. Yeah. So I think it's a real challenge that we you know, more tech and better fitness doesn't necessarily guarantee more people better wellness. And tech itself is going in a completely different direction. We might touch on that later.
Yeah, we'll come on to that. Yeah. So you had a bit of a penny drop moment when you started health screenings with these sort of normal Gen Pop type people. What was that moment?
I suppose the penny drop was the testing that was going on in a traditional medical screen, health assessment, wasn't speaking to their needs. You know, and I still have that challenge of whose job is it for defining health? You know, and it must be in the context of the individual. So living example is that those health assessments I started in, hour with a nurse, blood tests, you know, blood pressure, bits and bobs, hour with a doctor, you know, probing fingers and you know, squeezy hands, and, you know, listening to your heart, you know, palpating circulation, and determining whether that person was unwell. I was the third hour of that assessment, passed into my office, and the message there was, this person is not unwell. In fact, they would often say, this person's completely well. Right. And I'd say, well, after an hour speaking to them, don't sound completely well to me, because they don't have any energy whatsoever. They've got countless musculoskeletal disorders, from knees that can't run to backs that can't bend. They've got question marks over their nutrition. They're carrying 3-4 kilograms more body fat than they should, and most of that sitting in and around their internal organs. They've got no sex drive. They've got a crap immune system. Their hair's falling out. They're a shambles. You know, and the reality is they're not necessarily happy. You know, so that's not for me to say those things are good or bad. But what was clear is that person did not feel well, yet the process that had undertaken had classified them as well. And the big revelation there is, of course, the absence of ill health is not the presence of good health. Right? No. So not having a cancer or not being in the middle of a heart attack doesn't mean you are flourishing. And it really got me into this, you know, very clear mindset, which isn't mine alone, that the health is linear, not binary. As in, I'm not ill or well, but I think of the body as working between minus 100, which is technically called dead, and plus 100, which might be optimal flourishing, right? And people are somewhere between those 2 points.
Right.
And medicine's really interested in catching people going from minus 15 to minus 100. But it hasn't got any skills or expertise in taking someone from, you know, minus 10 to plus 40. It hasn't got a cultural, technical expertise in improving health and well-being. It's got a technical capability in correcting illness. So its job, which it's exceptional at doing, is finding people who are breaking down and stopping that breakdown. So if I develop a health condition, there'll be a treatment protocol, or there'll be a drug that takes away probably the symptoms of that dysfunction, but it doesn't move me into a higher state of well-being. And so what was so obvious there was no professional responsible for moving people away from disease towards optimal functioning in a collective holistic fashion. And so, we had medicine brilliant at fixing broken people with tests that find broken people. And then we had maybe elite performance, grabbing the people in that marginal gains category, going, look, you're 90 out of 100, and I want to get you to 95 so you win an Olympic gold medal, or you beat your personal best. But most people aren't at plus 90 and most people aren't at minus 50. They're somewhere between minus 10 and plus 10.
Right.
They're just sort of languishing. And that's partly because the world is ever more difficult to be well in. That's a big topic. But what I find amazing is that group of people get no structured expertise. What they do get is a barrage of products that say, I'll make you feel better. Rub this cream on you, Giles, and you'll feel like $1 million. Do this particular exercise routine and that will lift you. Wear this device and that will improve your well-being. So we've seen a bursting of the product marketplace in well-being, and well-being itself, just recently valued at 5.6 trillion, globally. It is predominantly a product marketplace selling to people who don't feel good, but have got no collective expertise in how they could navigate their way out of that. So my revelation was medicine's job is not to do well-being. Some practitioners can very well, but culturally and technically they're skilled in diseased to non-diseased, or from ill to not so ill. Performance has been too fixated on the top percent, and the average person is buying products to make themselves feel better in the absence of structured advice. And I felt data and empathetic, holistic coaching in that space was a real opportunity.
Nice, and I think there's an interesting point on what you raised there in terms of what you brought up previously with how gyms are marketing themselves, and that kind of narrative around, you can't really sell someone on something that might happen to them. Like, do some exercise so you don't get cancer in the future, but you can talk about the problems that they're having right now, like the back pain or the low libido or the feeling tired all the time or all that kind of stuff, like feeling like you did 10 years ago type thing. Or
%. Yeah. I think it's, the idea that I could get you out of bed on a Wednesday morning to an ice bath so you don't get Alzheimer's in 50 years' time. You have got to be seriously worried about Alzheimer's, and therefore to sell you a sort of fear-based agenda. And the idea of adhering to behaviours to avoid something that is intangible is of course not. It's so obvious that wouldn't work. Don't smoke so you don't get a heart attack. Yeah, great. A heart attack is totally intangible till you've had one. I'll tell you, after someone has a heart attack, they stop smoking. But they've been watching on every cigarette packet for 20 years. This causes heart attacks. This causes lung cancer. They get it. And then they correct their behaviour.
Right, yeah.
And so the idea of selling lifestyle actions as a prevention of intangible, mythical creatures in the future is for me an ineffective communication tool. I care about what people care about. So if I want to coach you to an improved behaviour, I need to know what's bothering you. If you come in and say, Giles, what's the best thing that could happen to you over the next 6 weeks? And you go, I'm knackered in the mornings. Then my well-being strategy comes about improving that. Now, the things I will give you to make you less knackered in the morning will coincidentally reduce your risk of Alzheimer's, reduce your risk of cancer, reduce your risk of heart disease, but it's tangible. And I could probably give some kind of quantitative marker that says, we measured you today and this is how knackered you are. I measure you in 6 weeks and now you're a bit less knackered. And what I'm trying to do there is build a lifelong relationship between you controlling the way you feel, rather than being beholden to someone else who gives you something that controls the way you feel. So I think using disease as leverage is an antiquated model of selling improved lifestyle. We have to look at what I would call functionality, and I have to start functionality with your dysfunction, not again some mythological idea of what optimal functioning looks like with me cartwheeling down a beach and go, you too can look and feel like me, which no one's going to buy. I can't cartwheel.
So you say fitness is nearly too far off the boat to jump back on when it comes to wellness. Unpack that a bit.
Yeah, I want fitness to be the boat of wellness. So I think that's really important. I think, well-being has semi-bypassed fitness to a degree. In fact, you look at I mentioned the Global Wellbeing Institute, annual wellbeing report, although they don't seem to do it every year, so that's interesting. At 5.6 trillion, and you look at the movement component to that, which is, it's a portion of a portion. So movement, which would include, equally anything that's about physical activity, so not just gyms, is a small portion of the global wellbeing market. The boom area seems to be things like wearables and democratized at-home medical devices. That area is growing, as well as athletic wear, which is obviously why that's included in the same report as lifestyle coaching and medicine. I'm not entirely sure. That aside, I look at the tech developments in well-being, and I don't see them coming through the gym. So I look at devices like Whoop, or I look at the advanced wearables. I mention my brother-in-law frequently, who turned up with a wearable device that captured his ECG, so the rhythm of his heart. It captured his sleep cycles. It did his oxygen saturation. It did a wrist-based blood pressure, resting pulse. I think it sort of told him what his favorite flavor of ice cream was. It did everything, right? And he's like, I've got this incredible device. What do I do with it? And I said to him, well, what question are you asking it? He's like, well, I'm not asking it any question at all. So we have this sort of data for data's sake. But why that's relevant is you could ask that same question to most gym instructors, personal trainers, and they wouldn't know what that data means. And so we're putting into the hands of the consumer advanced, quantitative data on their health and well-being that they can't discuss with the person who's looking after their lifestyle. So, if I've got a device that's measuring sleep and I can't discuss that with my personal trainer, if I've got, advanced tracking of nutrient markers, be that continuous glucose monitoring, be that some marker of gut health, and I can't discuss that with my personal trainer. If I've got some marker looking at recovery and stress, and I can't discuss that with my personal trainer is my movement guy or girl. They load me up, their sets and reps, they count them out for me, but they're not my well-being coach. And so I'm worried that technology has basically been able to measure something and immediately sold that as a solution to the consumer, and that in itself is wrong. We've got parameters that don't mean anything booming their way into most people's lives on a regular basis, because data without context is junk. But what we've got is the fitness industry has lagged in its education to keep up with the physiologicals that have been put into the hand of the consumer. So if there is someone in your gym and you do not understand the mechanism of why a Whoop is telling them to down-regulate how hard they train that day, I worry for you, because that's where we are today. And in 2 years' time, with the AI integration of Whoop, you could ask the Whoop what type of training you should do, and it might answer you better than the trainer could. Again, that's in beta, so these are relatively new concepts. So what fitness can't do is work on the idea that having a great facility, having incredible community means that they're at the table from a well-being perspective. Yeah, and again, that's a great product for people who love fitness, people who enjoy the community of it, people who want to compete in athletic gym-based events, etc. But the average person doesn't feel very well. The average person is lacking in energy. The average person has multi-system dysfunction. And at the moment, gyms and the people within gyms are playing a very limited role in shaping that strategy. And I think if that goes another 5 years down the line, gyms will not be able to catch up with the wellbeing revolution.
Why do you think fitness isn't taken seriously as a healthcare intervention?
It's a great question. I think the challenge is, I think fitness is, in terms of movement for movement as medicine is sort of a growing concept. I think one of the challenges of the separation between movement for medicine and the gym as a healthcare intervention is gyms haven't proven that they move the dial on healthcare outcomes. I'm not aware, and someone might bring me up and go, oh, it's there, but I'm not aware of data that proves going to a gym improves your health. It's sort of it's an assumed thing. But if most people in gyms are average age 24, they're probably not showing up in cardiovascular disease statistics. They're probably not showing up in diabetes statistics. They're sort of a well group getting slightly more weller. And so they're not really moving the dial on population health disorders. I think when it was a really tough job for UK Active to lobby to open gyms. I mean, ideally they'd have opened before pubs, but it was a difficult job because you can't prove that gyms improve the immune capability of the nation. We know regular exercise improves immunity, but you can't prove that gyms improve immunity. I know that sounds odd, but we haven't got that sort of silver bullet. And that's partly a fallibility of the fitness industry. It's never proved what it changes, right? So I can go to a gym and go, brilliant, you've got this amazing community, you've got an incredible retention statistic. How many of your members got fitter last year? And they'll be like, well, we've got this retention statistic. This is how many people buy personal training. This is how much whey protein we sell. I say, these are all lovely stats. How many got fitter? How many, what was your average loss of fat tissue? How much of that was visceral fat? What was your average improvement in lean tissue? What was the average improvement in strength? What was the improvement in aerobic capacity? What was the biomechanical changes you created? And trust me, you're changing all those things in every gym. But without turning it into a science lab, we've never proven that we are effective. Right. And without that silver bullet, don't cry when someone says, I don't believe in you. So I think there's a data piece missing above and beyond adherence, which isn't strong enough. Adherence is one thing, but change is another. Lots of people, when some of the gyms tied themselves into insurance schemes, so attendance of a gym, changed your premiums on your insurance, people would clock into the gym, have a latte, clock out. It's like, and so the insurance companies weren't so sure about this because going to a gym doesn't make you more well. Right. In fact, in that situation, depending on how many lattes you drank, you could argue that the people were getting less well from driving to a gym, having 2 lattes, driving out, so they got their insurance premium. But it's a moot point in terms of if you can't prove the difference between someone who turns up and has a latte and someone who turns up and does quality, split routines with multiple systems of biology improving, again, don't turn around and go, we're a credible health and wellbeing solution. I think there's a great challenge in the fact that at the moment there's just so much overwhelming demand into the NHS for it to look up and create a truly preventative agenda is difficult, and it doesn't quite know what to do. And we are seeing some good schemes spilling out of the NHS. So UK Active have created this musculoskeletal hub program, which is trying to create if you like, an overflow remit for people who can't get into physiotherapy appointments or can't access, quality musculoskeletal therapy, and then implant them into local, gym-based facilities. So there are shards of green there, and that's really exciting. I think, to me, still, the broader piece is the gym industry is waiting for the government to send it people, and I've got a problem with that, in the fact that I want people to come on their own volition. I want someone to feel a personal accountability for their health and well-being. And one of the great challenges in this country is our NHS is so good that it removes some of the accountability for being well. And in fact, I can gain as much weight as I like, and then when it tips into a problem, I'll be into a blood sugar program, I'll be into an obesity program, I'll be into whatever program I want. If we removed all healthcare infrastructure in this country for a year, what would be the impact on behaviour? I had a terrifying experience of living on a desert island for 2 months, and it was like, right, if I get a broken leg here, I'm dead. If I get an infection here, I'm dead.
Where was that?
It was off the Philippines. I was working as a scuba diver, which for someone of my skin tone was one of the worst decisions ever. There's the local fish came in abundance to observe the new white fish that was floating just a metre below the surface. But I'll tell you what I didn't do was take any activities or behaviours that could risk my life, because a small accident there would be a catastrophic outcome. Now it's a over-exaggerated example, but when there isn't an infrastructure to pick you up, you behave differently. Yeah. And so I'm very aware that everyone's waiting for the government to send people who've reached a level of discomfort into gyms as part of that therapeutic domain. For me, communicating about the broader benefits to, again, the gen pop who are slightly dysfunctional but not clinically unwell is a bigger market opportunity. Because the minute I'm dealing with unwell people, so on a treatment pathway from MSK, musculoskeletal, or cancer rehabilitation, or cardiovascular rehabilitation, I need a much more technical skill set. If I'm taking the 55-year-old female who's perimenopausal or menopausal, who's gained a bit of weight but doesn't sleep well, doesn't eat particularly well, doesn't move well, has lost a bit of self-confidence, I need to speak to her directly and have her value what I'm going to offer her. So I think if we wait for the NHS or the state to send us these people, we'll be waiting a long time.
And on that same kind of point, you talk about the fitness industry being almost like a damage centre at times, and people being almost fed the wrong workouts in a way. Can you talk us through that a bit?
I can. You have done your research. So this is what an excellent question. Yeah, exercise is damage. In most cases, it's physiological stress of which the body goes, "Oh, Giles, that hurt. I don't want that to hurt me as much when you do it again in 3 days' time. So I'll build more muscle fibers to be stronger. I'll increase the number of blood vessels to clear out that oxygen debt that you created. I will increase the flexibility of my tendons so that range of motion doesn't take me to the edge." Yeah, right. There's no such thing as fitness. There's survival. And your body thinks, if I lift heavy, do heavy aerobic exercise and do significant mobility, that you've created some kind of new obstacle to my survival. And so we damage our body through exercise. We then adapt that when we come back to train, we hope we're in a slightly higher state of capability. Classic, sort of PE 101, which is, damage, recovery, and super compensation. What we've got to recognize is that damage needs a body that can sustain damage. Right? So if I'm someone who is juggling young children, working a 16, 17-hour day, dealing with a family crisis, then my physiology has already spent its day exuding a huge amount of energy. And then at the end of that day, I'm going to go and then put it into a state of significant damage. And that may be fine, but for many people, exercise at high intensity in particular is adding a huge physiological stress to a system that's already physiologically stressed. The reason, again, wearable heart rate variability devices like Whoop and Aura are booming is because people can't believe how close they are to overtraining on relatively mediocre training volume. I might watch a CrossFit documentary and see someone trains 3 times a day. I think Rich Froning, I remember watching, training 3 times a day. I was like, oh my God. And again, he's got an incredible ability to buffer the inflammatory processes created through the damage of exercise. And he's a physiological phenomenon, as everyone at that level would be. But if you take the average person who's effectively, their body thinks they're training from the minute they wake up because they're on 24-hour news, they're on social media, they're eating hyper-palatable, ultra-processed food. They're in a state of low-grade physiological stress all day long, and then they train like a CrossFit athlete. It's no surprise that the volume of damage then overwhelms their ability to buffer, and we get markers of overtraining. And that might be simple markers like reduced progression, it might be disrupted sleep, it might be disrupted digestion, but it more likely plays into immunity, and it could equally play into mental health. So I think we've just got to bear in mind exercise is damage. And if we're dosing damage, we have to offset that against the general damage that's going on. And, without turning everyone into fixation on recovery is when we grow. I don't get fitter when I train, I get fitter between training sessions. I don't grow during the day, I grow during sleep. I don't regulate my memory in the day, I regulate during sleep. So if we neglect recovery as a key biological series of processes, we cannot obtain the benefit from the work we're putting in. So 2 parts. I think that the world is more hyper-stimulating than it's ever been before. Doesn't mean it's more stressful, but that hyper-stimulation creates an opportunity for overtraining on relatively low dose. And we need to, again, work against the environment to drive more deliberate recovery techniques, of which the biggest weapon is, of course, sleep. Because, again, I don't get fitter when I train, I get fitter when I rest. And that message can be lost when I watch enough people on Instagram showing me an outrageous training regime when they don't lead the life that I lead.
So this led to your work coming into the fitness sector with Nuffield Health, and that kind of providing well-being and owning the areas that doctors aren't owning ultimately. What does that look like?
I think I suppose when Nuffield Health, which was right back in the early 2000s, was saying, could we create that bridge between dysfunctional, at a clinical level, and performance aesthetic facilities. And again, there was a step in the right direction. I think everyone recognises that there's a grey space there.
Yes.
And the challenge that everyone's going to face is, what is the operating model to realise that? So if I create my version of an ideal wellbeing facility where that 55-year-old female is having her recognised needs and unrecognised needs met beautifully. And again, let me define that a bit better. There's great movement management, in forms of intelligent exercise prescription, but there's also great nutritional and eating support, to her level of understanding. There's a recognition of recovery and sleep, and there's adequate provision of intelligent parameters to prove success. Let's take that facility. Can I guarantee that facility will fill its boots when I open it in a catchment area? Right, so if you open a big box operator gym, they've got an algorithm that says that's the number of houses in that region, that's the percentage that will fall into our category. We'll fill that gym at $29.99 a month, blah, blah, blah. Because we know that patterns and behaviors of gym users. we don't know the patterns and spending behaviours of non-gym users. So who's going to fund a facility that doesn't guarantee the core audience? And I think, what the Nuffield experience was, it put a toe in the water in terms of creating increased analytics at the journey. So, what they now call the health MOT. It upskilled its practitioners to be more diverse. And I think it's doing some great work in pockets in terms of bringing in, say, long COVID populations and musculoskeletal. So I think it's a really good developing footprint to deal with some of those clinical areas and lots of work going on in that space. But I'm still not sure it's the place for my 55-year-old female to get her collective needs met. And the reason being is Nuffield doesn't want to lose its existing gym audience.
Yeah.
So, I can sit here without the bank on my shoulders who are saying, there's the square footage, that's the yield per square footage, make it happen.
Yeah.
So I can sit here, slightly idealistically and say, here's this facility. I can't point at many places that have got that right and said they've made a commercial success out of delivering a true well-being proposition. And I think, until someone's absolutely funded to a level that they can explore that, it's going to be difficult. Because I know if I open a gym, I'll fill it with gym users, I'll deliver a Me Too product, and it will work. I don't know if I do that with a true wellbeing product, if that's the case.
Right.
So that's where I sit, trying to allow people to sort of judiciously, as in effectively, safely step towards that space without necessarily ostracizing their core audience, because I recognize that utopia view of the new facility that serves that need is probably commercially unrealistic.
Right. And why do you think a fit pro is better placed than a doctor to manage this kind of whole well-being piece?
Yeah, I think doctors, are one of the most highly skilled professionals in the world. They're trained to identify dysfunction and disease and correct it. That's their skill set. Their technical training on lifestyle is de minimis. They're often not necessarily trained in behavior coaching or the techniques to take someone from where they are to where they need to get to. They're a highly trained scalpel that does a very specific thing. And just because they deal with disease doesn't make them an entire 360-degree well-being solution. And again, I've worked 22 years with doctors at every level, and they didn't do the training in movement prescription, in nutritional management, and in many cases things like sleep and stress that your mid-level to upper-level fitness professionals got. So I think we've got to keep them doing what they do, which is identifying ill health, managing that, triaging into complex health conditions and consultants, and praise and reward that work. That means they're so scarce that I get a 7-minute GP appointment and I'm only allowed to bring up one health concern per visit, right? So we don't necessarily want that practitioner to become, a holistic professional, because we need them to do what they're doing.
Yes, yeah.
So I think when we look at lifestyle management and we separate it into the key, 5 areas that affect you and me, which is, my movement affects me, my nutrition affects me, my sleep and recovery affects me. I'm also affected by the way I think, so mindset, and I'm also affected by my environment, which might be everything from noise to light to dark to toxicity, air pollution, blah, blah, blah. Those 5 variables, they affect me. And I would love there to be someone who could help me work out correct decision making across those 5. I look at them and I go, which one's the most complicated? And I think it's probably movement, right? Because to a certain extent, movement may require coordination of cardiovascular and aerobic work. What does that look like? Movement requires good movement patterns to avoid breaking people down and biomechanics. Movement requires an understanding of strength, progressive overload. And within what people learn as a personal trainer is they're actually affecting 3 incredibly important domains of biology: my aerobic capacity, my musculoskeletal system, and my pliability and neuromuscular system, coordination. That's quite heavy stuff, right? Now, when we go to food, you can go, well, food is super complicated too. Yes and no, in the fact that 50% of the UK diet is, hyper-palatable, ultra-processed food. Now, me taking someone who eats 50% processed food and getting that to 45% will be a significant improvement in their well-being. So I think we've over-technicalized nutrition. Now, when I've got someone who's got a complex irritable bowel syndrome, or is managing a health condition, or has got, a comorbidity and it needs a specific diet, I want clinical nutritionists and dietitians managing that. If I've got someone who eats a pretty average diet who wants to improve their nourishment, then it's not rocket science. It's a labour-intensive process of swapping out processed for whole, adequate protein, adequate fibre, adequate diversity, adequate respect and patterns of eating. And again, eating disorders, etc., into the professionals. But most people just don't eat that good a diet. So someone who can correct macros and micros within a fairly consistent bandwidth, that person I think is a fitness professional. Then we get to sleep and stress, and I think they're two opaque subjects. People don't know what they mean, and they're actually relatively simplistic to coach on. Again, 60% of people in the UK have got some form of sleep disorder. Half of that is a clinical issue, so an insomnia or what we call a sleep apnea, where you don't breathe properly through the night, or you starve your body of oxygen. But the other half are lifestyle mediated, which is like simple stuff like misuse of caffeine, misuse of alcohol, not understanding light in the morning and darkness in the evening, not understanding temperature regulation, not understanding a range of behavioural factors that inhibit natural sleep. So I think we sometimes feel those areas are too technical because they sit on what people might call a sort of a medical or clinical domain, but there's a huge area pre-clinical, as in before this is a medicalised issue. So that, like I say, from 10 to minus 15, there's no one looking after that. And someone might say, oh, I need to see a sleep professional. Well, if you go to a sleep lab, that's predominantly respiratory and breathing orientated. That's not, oh, Giles, you know you shouldn't have a double espresso, 8 p.m. at night. There's no, alcohol kills sleep cycles. You know that waking up at a different time and going to bed at a different time every day really disrupts the hormones that regulate sleep. And the reality is most people don't know that stuff. And someone sensitively and consistently delivering that information is huge value. Long-winded answer, but I think if we've got those three, then environments like, okay, be careful with, wear SPF, don't go running down the side of the M25, and mindset, again, from a basic point of view, is something that naturally builds through physical exertion anyway. Grit, resilience, self-worth. These are things that we've been building for people for generations. So I think when I look at the collective 5 areas of lifestyle, fitness is the best placed baseline skill to integrate them all in a way that's delivered by people who've already got empathy, full of passion, live it, breathe it, feast it, they drink the Kool-Aid, as people would say. And to me, that profession harnessed correctly is a weapon of choice.
Brilliant. Yeah, so ultimately empowering the fitness professional to help manage the other areas of circadian rhythms, all those sorts of areas of their clients to,
million
beyond
circadian rhythm, basic nutrition, basic mindset, basic environment. Then you are a collective wellbeing professional, with a relatively easy amount of training. And I think again, that combustible professional could be deployed anywhere. It really can. And I particularly like the idea of that person going into organisations, because organisations are often full of people who don't go to gyms. And the benefit to an organisation, if I improve behaviours across those domains, is they get productivity, they get reduced absenteeism, they get increased engagement, and the individuals get improved energy. Whatever bothers them less. So corporate well-being is interested in people who can speak across a latitude of areas. They don't want someone coming in talking about fitness, because only fit people turn up for that talk.
Yes, makes a lot of sense. And on that point, I guess, I think a lot of fit pros feel that kind of imposter syndrome when communicating in anything outside of movement. In practical terms, what are the cans and can'ts of those sort of areas?
Really good point. And I always like people who've got imposter syndrome. I prefer them to someone who, listens to 5 minutes of Huberman and has got people doing the physiological sigh in gravity boots, while cold plunging. I think it's a challenge. We often get, 2 spectrums, people who sort of see one, hear one, do one, and then people who sort of feel a bit paralysed by the sense they might get something wrong.
Right.
I think the question there is a bit like the medical principle, do no harm. So when I'm looking at the behaviours I might be recommending for someone with a sleep issue, all of those things are beneficial. What I'm not going to be able to do is diagnose. And where I really focused my training for many, many years is avoiding diagnostic language, which would be something as simple as a blood pressure. If I measure your blood pressure and go, oh, you're 162 over 95, and I want those figures below 140 and below 90. If I say, oh, that's stage 2 hypertension, I've given you a medical condition. Me saying I've measured a raised blood pressure, now I'd like to factor what we do with that, it is the same test delivered in a completely different way, recognizing that data is transient, that I can't classify a condition. But with that raised blood pressure, I'm just going to use that to influence my programming. I'm going to make sure that I don't do anything, significant until we've had clarification from a medical professional. Diagnostic language will also be causative to say, the reason you don't sleep is because you have too much caffeine, right? So that again attributes a direct correlation between a behavior and the outcome.
Right.
And we can never be that clear. What we can say is, you've noted to me you don't sleep well. I've noted you have significant caffeine. I'd be interested to see, if I reduce that caffeine, what the impact is on your sleep. So if I remove diagnostics and I remove causation, then what I can do is, you've told me about the thing that's bothering you, or we've identified a thing that's bothering you. These are things that can influence that. Are you up for trying a change in that habit or behavior over a period of time? And that space creates a scope of practice, which means by not diagnosing anything, by not saying A equals B, I can basically have almost any conversation I want. And that, again, aligns with what the expectations would be of the medical community, who don't want someone coming into their office who is told they don't sleep because of caffeine, but they've actually got a clinical sleep apnea. And that discredits our industry further. Because anyone who's sure of anything with human physiology is surely wrong, right? Because one thing does not equal one thing. Someone who goes, that's because of that, they might build placebo. If I say to you, Giles, the reason you're struggling with all this stuff is because you don't have enough gut bacteria. The minute I'm that confident in that single mechanism, yes, I get more buy-in and compliance from you, but I've immediately misunderstood the way the body works, which is one thing does not cause one thing, rarely. It's a multitude. You're more likely 25%ers than you are 250%.
Yeah.
And that again brings me to the idea that if I see everything through the lens in which I'm trained, if I see everyone's problems because they're inactive and I'm a movement specialist, if I see everyone's problems because they're malnourished and I'm a nourishment specialist, if I see everyone's problems as disordered sleep because I'm a sleep specialist, then I'll be confident I'm the solution to everything. When you take a step back and you see the integration of all those different lifestyle factors, you realize rarely is it one problem, which means rarely is it one solution. And a softening and accuracy of language is the first and fundamental part of being able to play in this space. Nice.
And if someone was looking to fill this gap in their services, is there any courses you'd recommend?
One unbelievably relevant question. Listen, I've got a course, Giles. I've got a course for a couple of reasons. I've got a course because I did a traditional exercise science degree. I then wrote the qualification that enabled me to work as a physiologist, and that level 7 diploma in health and wellbeing physiology basically sort of filled a gap between what you learn taking sports people to be better sports people and what you need to help general people improve the quality of their life, plus minus data. That course isn't publicly available, so before people get excited. But what I looked at and said, look, I learned loads about basic nutrition, I learned loads about movement management, and I learned lots about coaching and behavior change, but I learned nothing structured and formal about stress and sleep. And if I looked at the landscape of my clinical work over the last 20 years, I don't think I found anyone who didn't need some adjustments in those areas. And again, you'll have that person who trains 3-4 times a week, split programs, against some fantastic thing. They control their macros, they do everything, but they don't feel good. And we've got this blind spot, which is, are they physiologically stressed? Are they under-recovered? Almost the same thing, but not quite. Do they have inadequate sleep recovery? What does that mean? And I just feel I wanted to give fitness professionals the opportunity to play into that space. On the first level to go, I can have a much broader conversation now. I've added stress and sleep and recovery into my language box. But also then, if I've got that plus nutrition plus movement, can I start to provide solutions to that corporate marketplace, i.e. a firm with 100 people?
Nice.
Can I do a talk there, or can I do some kind of intervention there, rather than go there and ask them to join my gym? Which is what most people in corporate wellbeing is. I'll do a talk on fitness and I'll sign up 3 people. I'm talking about going in and creating education content, going in and potentially delivering coaching to people without a physical facility to back you up. So Future Practice was a company I founded with a brilliant fitness and lifestyle professional, Harry Jameson, who's very much the face of the business because he's a beautiful creature. And he also, and he's a great living example of, when you take a fitness professional's capability, add well-being to it, that you can achieve significant different industries. So, Harry, who's now the CEO of a well-being brand called Pillar, really, leveraged wellbeing as a tool to elevate him above the fitness industry. So we set up Future Practice. We deliver a course which is digitally delivered called Practical Stress Resilience Coaching. And we feel within that course, we add that third leg of the table to movement and nutrition. And we've had some wonderful results from graduates who've gone through that course thus far.
Nice. I've heard really good things. So yeah. So we've covered it a little bit, but digging back into that kind of practical element and what our gym owners and coaches can kind of start implementing straight away. I think you talked a lot about the kind of metrics, and you regularly ask gyms whether they are making the difference and turning the dial on their members, and a lot of them aren't able to tell you. What are those key metrics you look at consistently, kind of thing, if you wanted to analyze whether a gym is producing the right results?
Yeah, I think you've got to be careful. I mean, people think I'm going to turn their gyms into sort of a laboratory, with a lab room where it looks like Rocky 3, where Dolph Lundgren's going through advanced testing. Might be dating, but people think that to do testing you've got to set up a sort of really higher level capability. Not necessarily. First thing I'd like is some kind of subjective appraisal of whether the individual feels better, because without that, what matters? I would like to determine if the goal that they had identified had been achieved. So subjective appraisal of feeling, a determination of goal completion is just a very logical thing. I like to quantify behavior, to go, look, these were your consistent behaviors, not just did you go to a gym or not, but these were your behaviors around movement outside of the gym. These were your behaviors about nutrition, sleep, recovery. So I can go, am I moving the dial? Because you might get someone who increases their exercise by 70%, but overeats because of the appetite, because of that, and the training's happening too late at night, and therefore you're killing quality deep sleep, and they're ending up feeling worse for the provision of more movement, right? Just as an unlikely but relevant example. So I like to determine collective behavior to see, have I become a behavior modification center, or am I a facility?
Right.
And I'm not anti-facility, because facilities can do extremely well. If you're taking data, I find it interesting that we would try and improve aerobic capacity without measuring it. I like VO2 max, which is a measure you can take in many different inactive forms. The old days of joining a gym, jumping on a Monarch spin bike and being destroyed and then never coming back. The idea of the first thing you did when you join a gym is doing a test to maximal exertion is a days gone by, and from a risk point of view, madness. But you can do VO2 max through sedentary testing to quantify your cardiovascular capacity. Again, assuming people are opting in to body composition analysis, I can't really understand why you wouldn't do that, because it's the main thing you're selling. And if I take someone who's 100 kilograms and I lose 10 kilograms, if I lose 10 kilograms of lean tissue, they're significantly less healthy at 90 kilograms than they were at 100. Because tissue, i.e. lean tissue, i.e. skeletal muscle, is life, right? So if I, drop you by 10 kilograms, but I increase your body fat percentage by 7 or 8, I have created a problem through, yes, I put you into calorie deficit, but I haven't created enough load to sustain your muscle mass. And that really is where gyms future-proof themselves and win, because weight management solutions have been plentiful, body composition solutions less so. Because anyone who's losing weight without strength training over the age of 35 is going to see most likely a higher proportion coming from lean tissue than fat tissue. Because in a state of decreased calorie abundance, why would I burn fat, not muscle? Just doesn't make any sense, right? So, so if I'm not measuring body composition, I can't be sure that the weight I'm losing is good weight, and I don't know if I'm repurposing composition, and it's the main reason most people join. So I'm again, body dysmorphia or people with eating disorders, that's opt-in, not opt-out. I'm going to do body composition on you. No, I've got the option of a body composition. So we have to play carefully in that space because of its emotional connotations. Movement quality. If I'm a yoga Pilates, instructor, if I do any kind of core, what's the outcome of that? We used to do functional movement screens. They're a little subjective. You do one, I do one. We both come up with different results. But some form of biomechanical analysis to improve or represent improved movement patterns, which should decrease my risk of injury or non-specific back pain, again, would be logical. If I'm just a movement center and I haven't measured the biological systems that get affected by movement, which are muscle mass, aerobic capacity, and movement quality, again, don't be surprised if someone leaves you because the joy ran out of it, or the community didn't deliver, or they didn't like the music. If you show to me that this attendance in this place with these things is moving this result, and that result equals a combination of, of reduced risk of future problems, but also links back to the thing I told you about that was my bothersome point, then you should have a person for life.
So, yeah, based on our conversation, what does the gym of the future look like?
I think the gym of the future could be the gym as it is now, because people will still want quality fitness prescription, they'll want great modern facilities, and that group of people going to the gym will want what they've got now. If you ask lots of people, members of cracking facilities, they're happy. So we haven't got to throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm still not sure where that phrase comes from. A terrible parent by the sounds of it. But I think there's an opportunity for market segmentation, which is clubs that are trying to bring more well-being capability into their facilities. I think my gym of the future would be a facility that's got improved service capability, not just improved facilities, i.e. people can have better conversations about full lifestyle management. I think if I've got that, there might be an increased range of parameters available, from the baseline 3 I've talked about, VO2 max, muscle mass measurement, movement pattern, but also markers of nutrition, glucose monitoring, markers of gut health, markers of biological age, more things to evidence, A, that we're effective, and B, curate a slightly more sensitized strategy to that individual. I think the technology is working in 2 ways: improve quantification of things we can't see, so things like sleep, stress, etc. I think integrating that into membership propositions would be logical. And we've got technologies that accelerate biological processes. So I recover pretty well, but I recover better in cold. I, flush my lymph pretty well with active recovery, maybe better with compression. So I think intelligent integration of technologies to measure and technologies to what I call augment physiology will be a no-brainer. We're seeing that happening as it stands. I think, taking ownership over lifestyle outside of the facility offers a real opportunity. That would lead, again, potentially into concierge-style services, that we become the partner in someone's health and well-being journey, not just a bit part player. And I can see that at a premium level where it's subscription-based and you have a membership to the club, not the facility. And that club, that gym looks after you holistically, intelligently, evidence-based and outcome-focused. And I think there's a lot of people who feel like they need that but don't know where to turn for that at the moment. And so they're on Amazon buying stuff that doesn't work.
And last but not least, I mean, you've been a massive help as part of our advisory board for PerformX 2024. Why is PerformX unmissable for a fitness professional, and what are you looking forward to about this year's event?
I've loved PerformX from the first encounter I had with it. In the fact, it felt like it was trying to keep people abreast of what is going on. So it felt cutting edge. I think it's, the speed of innovation is far greater than the speed of application. So I don't know where people's source for what's happening is, but if they haven't got a good one, they should come to PerformX, because the advisory panel that I'm delighted to be a part of are some great industry voices saying what they're seeing, what they're feeling, and looking to bring that to, again, the gym industry, the fitness trainer industry. So you can't be abreast of everything. If you take the collective voices of that table and their collective opinions, I think you get a really refined perspective on the present best practice, but also future and innovation. I'm looking forward to again seeing best practice. I work in often non-operational roles, so I'm interested in what some of the trial and error is of some of the operators. I'm always interested in the technology developments. I'm always interested in the mismanagement of female health into our sector and the rise of organisations like the Well HQ, who are teaching me things that I'm going to implement with my daughter and my wife and my mother in the mismanagement of lifestyle into females and how we can do that better. I'm looking to go somewhere where I don't know everything, right? And not being big-headed, but I can go to a conference, it's just echo chamber of the same stuff being said again and again. There's different perspectives, different opinions, different expertise. And I need to, in the same way as lifestyle, I must focus on the areas in which I'm weakest, not continue to consolidate my areas of strength. I will go to stuff that I'm crap at, and I'll hear from experts who light a fuse in me. I'll go to things I don't understand, and I'll hope to move my knowledge from incapable to baseline. And I think the diversity and intelligence of the speakers and events at PerformX is unlike any other event.
Mic drop. Yeah, no, brilliant. Yeah, it's going to be unmissable. You can get your early bird tickets now, bit of a plug. But yeah. We've also got a free ticket option this year, which is to really just unite the industry, get more people there, more networking. Yeah, just bring everyone together and as you say, just all about learning and growth. So yeah, thanks a lot for coming on. It was an absolute pleasure. And yeah.
My pleasure. Giles, fantastic. Thanks for the event as well. And I'll see everyone listening at PerformX. I can't wait.